Good morning, everyone. All right, this side, thank you. This side, you guys are having fun, and I love that. As Scott was saying, Pastor Ken's not in the house today, and we do want to keep him in our prayers. Honestly, I'm proud of the guy for calling and taking a sick day. You know what I mean? Good for him. I'm thankful that he gets to be able to be home and resting, and I know that Sherry is taking good care of him. We want to keep Sherry in our prayers too through all this. But, just real quick, I just want to thank you, Scott, for your heart in regards to that. And we're not a church that is perfect. I'm going to apologize in advance for that right now. We're not perfect, and I do really appreciate. You're going to see that today, actually. You're going to see that we're not perfect. But I really appreciate the heart of our leaders and how we meet and address the things that need to, with humility and transparency, and openness and honesty, just like a family would with each other who loves each other. And I pray for your graciousness as well as you receive some of the mistakes, missteps, errors of our ways and everything else. It's good to be family. It really is. We're not up here trying to be professional anything. We're trying to let God be God, and we're continuing to allow him to do so, right, week after week, and just learning and growing and all these things. So again, if you are a visitor here, my apologies. I am not Pastor Ken. You really need to come back. In the meantime, I'm going to just preface this all by saying I got the confirmation about this last night. It was sometime in the evening. I really thought PK was going to be here. He said, just be ready. And then as we were kind of monitoring the progress, he said, 60-40, I'll be there. And then he said, 70-30, I'll be there. And then he said, you're on. So I wasn't planning that. But I had something that I really love taking this journey on. It's a teaching that I did this summer at youth camp, and it's just all about truth. So we're going to go into this teaching today. It'll be a topical teaching, which is not normal. And I will just tell you guys, topicals are challenging. They're kind of all over the map. And this was an exceptionally challenging topical for myself as well as the recipients. You guys might hear words today that I don't know what. I'm going to try to articulate as well as I can and walk us through everything. But I do want you to know, teenagers got this, okay? They got this. In fact, I even tested it. Who better than like 8th and 9th grade boys? So I sat with them before we even started the teaching over the summer camp. And I said, hey, I'm going to explain some of these things to you. You tell me if you check out in 2 seconds. And I'm walking them through it, and they're like, no, that's good. That's good. We're following. And I kept going, and they kept following. So I think we're okay, all right? So I just want you guys to know, kids got this, okay? Hang in there. It's going to be a journey, but children got this. So I think we're going to be in good shape. I'm going to pray, and then we will begin. Lord, I want to thank you again for truth. It is something that has changed my life over and over again, both when my truth was a violation to your truth, and then coming to the sweet surrender of absolute truth. And so, Lord, I want to lift up all of this to you this morning, and I want to pray for everything from our guys who are working AV, the ushers, the teachers, everyone who is operating here in this building for your kingdom, ministers of this kingdom. And I want to pray for your grace to abound where our errors might be present. And I want to pray, Lord, ultimately that truth would land in our hearts and in our minds, and that we would be able to understand even more the concepts and the way of our thinking and how we come to these conclusions. We lift up all these things to you, Lord, and we give you all the glory in Jesus' name. And everyone said, amen. Okay, so let's start off here. What better to start with than the babes? So we're going to start off with, in regards to truth. I know what this is like now. The letters of children to God. Dear God, did you mean for the giraffe to look like that, or was it an accident? Dear God, I bet it is very hard for you to love all of everybody in the whole world. There are only 4 people in our family, and I can never do it. Right? We know truth when we hear it. Dear God, thank you for the baby brother, but what I prayed for was a puppy. Dear God, how come you didn't invent any new animals lately? We still have just the old ones. Dear God, maybe Cain and Abel would not kill each so much if they had their own rooms. It works with my brother, Larry. Listen, we're just helping God out here. Dear God, my grandpa says you were around when he was a little boy. How far back do you go? Dear God, my brother told me about being born, but it doesn't sound right. Truth, right? Here's another one. If you're arguing with a woman and she says, wow, run. Truth. We have truth on all different levels today. Okay, so now I want us to just take a look at some verses in Psalms and just how the Word presents truth. And what I want you guys to do with this, I want you to think about these. Like, you might be familiar with some of these. Some of these might even be memory verses of yours. But I want you to think as if I were needing to explain this to a child or something. How would I explain some of these things? What does the Lord want me to understand as I'm looking at these verses? So the first one here is Psalm 43:3. Oh, send out your light and your truth. Let them lead me. Let them bring me to your holy hill and to your tabernacle. And so a kid says, what does that mean? Send out your I understand light, like I have a flashlight, Dad, but what does that mean to send out your truth, right? How do we think about that? How do we process that? How do we help somebody understand that? Psalm 51:6, behold, you desire truth in the inward parts, and in the hidden part you will make me to know wisdom. So the Lord desires truth, not just superficially, but he desires truth in our innermost parts. Psalms 86:11, teach me your way, O Lord. I will walk in your truth. Unite my heart to fear your name. So walking in truth, like this is super Christianese stuff. But then if you go to explain that and understand that, what that means to walk in truth, what is it that you're doing? How are you acquiring this truth to walk in? How do you know when you're walking in truth? Psalm 119:30, I have chosen the way of truth. Your judgments I have laid before me. And I like that last part of that because it kind of gives an explanation as to how this works. And we're going to lay out the Lord's word, his judgments before, so we can understand them and then choose and walk in these ways. And then the Lord is near to all who call upon him, to all who call upon him in truth. Just think about that extra line that was added to that. It's not just Lord, Lord, right? This is Lord, Lord in truth. So, as we're moving along here with truth, ask yourself, how would you define truth? How would you explain truth to a young student? Right off the bat, it's without any falsehood. We almost start from the place of saying what it isn't. It contains nothing that's false. It is a conformity to reality, what is real, and the things that align with what is real. It is certainty, and it is fact. So just real simple, basic things as to what truth is. But that last part, right? That last part, it is fact. What are facts? Are facts and truth the same thing? So I'm going to try to go easy on the Latin here, but factum in the original Latin denotes nothing more than a thing that is done. That is a fact, something that is done. An isolated fact is like a stray piece of a puzzle. It's an object, an article, a fragment of information, a bit of trivia. So truth and facts are not necessarily the same thing. Facts are observed, tested, verified. Facts are empirical. Truth is revealed. That took me a while to kind of sit with. Is that right? I'm working through it. I'm checking other pastors. I'm looking into my research and everything. But in every way, this is the conclusion that I have found with Scripture and also with facts. So, truth is all about meaning. To put it another way, discerning truth is a matter of interpreting the facts. For example, if I were to say there was a fire in Oklahoma City last night, fact. If I were to say that was my home that was on fire, we have more that's revealed there. There's truth there. If I say a date on a calendar, okay, that's one thing. But if I say September 11th, there's more to that. There's more truth there. If I were to say this is a building, we would all say amen. But if I say this is the sanctuary, there's more to that there, okay? In a courtroom setting, everything is based on facts and truth. We present facts to determine the truth. The truth will be revealed, right, through these facts. So, everything from the sworn testimony, it says, do you solemnly swear that you will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God, right? We want to understand what happened and the meaning in which something happened to figure out intentions and motives and things like that. The same facts are available to both the prosecution as well as the defense, right? Everyone has access to the same things. There's nothing hidden from either side in the law. That would be called new evidence, and it's not admissible. It has to be something that's reviewed by both parties. So everyone has access to the same facts, and yet we have two completely different conclusions, don't we? Well, which one is true? Each attorney puts his own story and conclusion upon the evidence, but this does not imply that both sides are true, because there can only be one truth. There can be many facts, but there can only be one truth in regards to these things. Even in Proverbs, verses 18, 17. And this works outside of court too, okay? The first to speak in court sounds right until the cross-examination begins. And this is going to kind of usher us into a lot of the material that we're going to be going into today. And that is information and sometimes the lack of information. So when somebody presents their case, they sound correct until somebody else speaks, right? This is one of the things we want to be careful of with our children. We don't want to just teach them one particular story over and over again as they're growing up in the Lord, and then they go off as adults into the real world, and then they hear other stories that debunk their belief system and everything, right? One person presents their case and they sound correct until the other side presents their case. So we want to be careful in all of the information. The truth emerges when the significance of the pattern and real relationship between facts becomes clear. In a court of law, an individual's entire future may hang on the balance of the jury to be able to recognize a single truth, right? And so, we're going to look at one of those today. It is Kirk Bloodsworth versus the state of Maryland. On July 25th, 1984, police discovered the body of 9-year-old Dawn Hamilton in a wooded area in eastern Baltimore County. The victim was found lying on her stomach with the victim's skull fractured and depressed. Near the victim's head was found a large piece of concrete stained with blood. The victim's neck had a patterned abrasion. The opinion of the medical examiner was that the death was a homicide and was a result of blunt trauma to the head and strangulation. This crime shocked the country in 1984. Witnesses close to the scene reported seeing a suspicious man, someone tall with curly hair, a bushy mustache, and tan skin. Shortly thereafter, police began circulating a sketch of the alleged perpetrator. An anonymous caller tips off the authorities that Kirk Bloodsworth is the man in the composite. On the morning of the murder, 10-year-old Christian Shipley and 7-year-old Jackie Poling were fishing at a pond near the scene. Christian testified that a man came by and his friend Jackie showed him a turtle that he had caught, like you do, right? Shortly thereafter, the victim, 9-year-old Dawn Hamilton, came by and asked the two boys to help her look for her cousin Lisa. The boys refused and resumed their fishing, like they do. The man, however, agreed to help Dawn, and the two walked off together. That was the last time Dawn was seen alive. After the body of 9-year-old Dawn Hamilton was found, Christian assisted the police in the production of a composite sketch in the likeness of the man. This is that sketch. Christian picked Kirk Bloodsworth from a photographic array as the man he saw walked off with Dawn. And this is Kirk Bloodsworth. Christian also made an in-court identification of Kirk Bloodsworth. Donna Ferguson tested that she saw the victim, 9-year-old Dawn Hamilton, talking with a man near the woods at approximately 10:30 a.m. on the day of the murder. At the police lineup, Mrs. Ferguson identified Kirk Bloodsworth as the man she saw with the victim. Mrs. Ferguson also made an in-court identification of Kirk Bloodsworth. James Keller testified that he was driving down Fontania Lane near the scene of the murder at approximately 6:30 a.m. when he saw a man standing by the side of the road. From both a photo array and a police lineup, Keller identified Kirk Bloodsworth as the man that he saw that day. Rose Carson testified, in August of 1984, Kirk Bloodsworth came to Cambridge and asked if he could spend the night at her home. Now, this is really kind of interesting because he's actually married at this time. And this is a neighboring town, not where he lives. And he's asking this woman if he could stay the night in her home. Ms. Carson testified that Bloodsworth told her, "I have done something really terrible. I'm afraid that me and my wife won't get back together because of it." Ms. Carson also testified that Bloodsworth said he was a suspect in the murder of that little girl. Tina Christopher testified that she had a conversation with Bloodsworth in Cambridge. He was talking about this little girl. I thought it was his daughter, so I didn't really pay too much attention to him, but he described what this little girl was supposed to have been wearing and things that went on, and he said that he and another guy were on the beach, and this girl came up to him and asked him to help her. Then the other guy took off with her somewhere. Did he say who the other guy was? No, I asked him that. I know he heard me because he looked up at me a couple of times, but he never did answer who he was. How many times did he talk about this little girl? Once. And then he left and came back and started talking about her again, saying they think I did it. Now, when you were talking with the defendant, how was she acting? It's hard to explain. He acted like something was wrong with him. Really wrong. Soon after the murder, Bloodsworth's wife filed a missing persons report concerning her husband. Based on information obtained from that report, Detective Cable interviewed Bloodsworth in Cambridge on August 8, 1984, concerning his activities on the day of the murder. Detective Cable testified that Kirk Bloodsworth had a hard time remembering his exact whereabouts, but that Bloodsworth said he had never been to the area near the murder scene. Detective Cable testified that he asked the defendant why he was going around telling people in Cambridge about a bloody rock when only policemen and the killer would have known about such rock. He said he didn't know why. He denied it at first and then just simply stated, "I don't know why I did it." In 1985, Kirk Bloodsworth was found guilty of sexual assault, rape, and first-degree premeditated murder. He was sentenced to death. How do we know what is true? How do we understand the information? How do we put facts together? This is going to dip into what we call epistemology. Epistemology is the philosophy of knowledge and belief. How do we know what we know? How does a person think? Why do they think this way? This is what we go through every day of our lives, guys. I never step on cracks in the sidewalk because I heard it will break my mother's back. Well, how do we determine if this is true? Why would stepping on a crack break my mother's back? How would it happen? Could it happen? And then, like most of us, I need to Google this, right? We'll go check this out. But we start investigating the information to ascertain truth, to see if this is possible. And then we have knowledge and belief. Knowledge actually equals cognitive success. So I understand this successfully. That is knowledge. The mental action or process of acquiring fact and understanding through thought, experience, and the senses. A familiarity, awareness, or understanding of someone or something. I have knowledge of them, right? fact that is known in the right way. So we're dealing with good information here with knowledge, right? But knowledge is always of truth or reality, and belief is not. Belief is not always of truth and reality. For example, if a 4-year-old tells you, I believe I'm Superman, probably does, right? Keep him away from stairs, right? Because those beliefs, not necessarily based on fact, not necessarily based on truth, but just beliefs, will very likely produce action in that young man's life. Okay, so we have knowledge. I know about Superman, but I now believe that because I took my pillowcase and put it behind me, I'm Superman now, and I could do these things. So I don't know why, except for this teaching, this happened necessarily, but I've lost my wallet 2 times. Like, I've never lost my wallet in my life, but in the past 3 months, I've lost it 2 times. I don't go to too many places, right? And so I was not really too concerned about it, and I was like, well, it's in the house, or it's in the car, or it's at church, right? And just like you guys, I'm going through drawers, and I'm looking under beds, and I'm checking everywhere. I know this building pretty well, just like most of you guys do. I know the ins and the outs, and I know all the little secret drawers and everything behind the cafe and everything. I've looked everywhere that I possibly could for that wallet. Same thing with my cars, plural. I'm in there with flashlights. I'm like, when you spend 30 minutes in one car looking, you know? Well, one day, my wife, she comes into church on a Sunday morning, and she puts the wallet down. And I gasped. Where did you find that? No, thank you. Thank you. But where did you find that? Because this was driving me crazy. And she said, it was in the car. Inconceivable. Right? Like, I spent so much time, not even just one time. I was back out in the car multiple days, check it again, look in some other weird, obscure place. And I kept on looking, and I never found it. And so I think we all understand what that's like, and I'm going to use that now to go into what I have heard taught as the atheist circle. So I heard a pastor one time talking about the quickest, simplest way to move somebody away from atheism. And so what he did was he drew a circle just like that, and he said, okay, and this person actually was a professor, right? So very, very knowledgeable man. And so he said to the professor, here's what I want you to do. I want you to imagine all of the information that exists in the entire universe, all of it. And I want you to imagine that fills the entire circle, right? Like, that circle represents all information about everything. With a pencil, shade in the amount that you know, that you would say represents your knowledge of everything. And so he shaded in, I don't know, something that was less than 20%, right? But even so, my goodness, wow, what a learned man you are. Surely you know more than most anyone that I may have ever met. That's a tremendous amount of information. How much don't you know? Is it possible in this vast sea of information that you have not yet acquired, there could be a God? And that usually ends that discussion as far as atheism goes. Because just like me looking for the wallet in my car day after day, week after week, and it was there the whole time, and that's something I really know, how much don't I know? Right? There is so much I don't know. And this is where it gets us in trouble with things. So we're going to use this kind of stuff to unpack the different types of truth. Because what we don't want to say, what we don't want to do as a church is we don't want to be divisive, and we don't want to push people away, because the whole world deals with reality every single day. But sometimes there's limitations, just like this atheist circle, just like me not knowing where my wallet is. There's limitations to what we know within that reality. And this is pretty significant. And when I was an atheist and other people told me, you're wrong, right? I'd be like, well, maybe you're wrong, you know? And we could go back and forth with this sort of a thing and get really nowhere. But something that's important to understand is that they are dealing with measures of reality. They might even know tons of stuff that you don't know. So we have to figure out what's important when it comes to truth. And this is where we'll talk about two different types of truth: existential truth and ontological truth. Remember, children got this, right? Hang in there. So existential truth, really simply, is relating to existence and experience. This is my perception, my perspective, my limited, finite feelings. This would also be what we call subjective truth. And then ontological truth is the branch of metaphysics dealing with the nature of being, things that are total and complete, absolute, certain reality. They're not the same thing, okay? So, for example, with existential truth, if a doctor says to a patient, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much pain are you experiencing? If you and I have the same exact injury, let's say we sprained our ankle or something like that, same exact injury though, and I said, this is a 10, doc, I'm dying here. And one of you moms is like, I don't know what he's talking about. I'm like at a 1.5, 2, right? I mean, am I wrong to say it's a 10? Are you wrong to say it's a 2, right? If in this room right now, I'm going to be really daring here, and I'm just going to say it's very likely not 100% of the people who are in this room feel like the temperature is exactly perfect. For some people, it is perfect. Oh, I love when it's a little bit chilly and cool. For other people, I'm dying, I'm thinking about going to another church, this place hates me, right? It is so cold in this room, and I don't know, right? So for some people, it can be perfect. For other people, not perfect. This is existential truth. It's not that it's wrong. This is what you're experiencing, okay? So this is your lived experience, your truth, your preferences, your acceptances, your violations, your happiness, your right, your wrong. But this can be really dangerous when this is just all you have, right? And before Jesus, this is all we had. It's not just me. This is all of us had. We had the world according to me. And there are truths in those things. Like I said, I'm cold. Okay. So as we start to look to see what happens with some of this, if we intentionally stop at my lived experience, my truth, we then reject the truth that is outside of your scope and willingness to concede truth. Okay? We remove God from the throne as Lord and supreme authority. We become the arbiters of truth and morality. Like I said, this has to do with you, the things that you accept as right and wrong. If anybody in this room were to see some moral event take place, let's say in our church, right, like after service, we see a little kid, a teacher is talking to a little kid and bending over, and that little kid just reached up and slapped her. Like, we would all be in a particular sense of shock. And I dare say, if there was a non-Christian in the whole building, maybe even in the zip code, and they saw the same exact thing, they might be shocked too, right? And it's because we were created as moral beings. We all live and experience these things. And so we all are processing on a regular basis everything that's happening in real time. But this went sideways back in Genesis chapter 3. So, in the day that you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. This is the first introduction to usurping the ontological truth, the absolute truth that was perfect and holy with God. So God said this, however, if you do this, you will be like God. And now I'm judging for myself, is this person right? Or is God right? And what happened here in Genesis chapter 3 was we have subjective truth taking precedent over objective truth. It happens every day, probably happens every day in our lives, right? We still sin. And so subjective truth in that moment and everything, it wins out. It's not just history. But we see this playing out with all of these steps perfectly from Genesis chapter 3, 5, and in 6. So when the woman saw that the tree was, in her judgment and estimation, good for food, that it was pleasant for the eyes, and the tree desirable to make one wise, she took of its fruit and ate. So this truth that she processed superseded God's truth. And sin is born. And it hasn't changed. We want to be like God. We want to determine what is right and what is wrong. We want supreme authority of our lives and to be like God. But the interesting thing about objective truth, can you think of anyone who has ever known truth more than Adam and Eve? Right? Like walking with God, everything perfect as it ought to be, a world without sin, that is perfect harmony with the truth, right? And even in that, they had limitations. They couldn't see the lie because they were using their own eyes and their own judgment of truth to see. This is the same exact thing that's happening with our culture today. And the last one, and the one before that, and the one before that, right? This is always. So, let me give an example. Abraham and Isaac. Let's say we all read Genesis chapter 22, and we have immersed ourselves in objective truth, the Word of God. And maybe there's some experiential truth in there. For example, let's say like, ooh, this is a story about a husband and a wife with a kid. I'm a husband, I get some of this. I'm a father too, so I get even more of this. This is really resonating with me, right? And then we get to something that may not make sense. Abraham, go take your son, your only son, and offer him up as a sacrifice. Well, listen, that should be hard, right, for anybody to process. This was a challenging task. It doesn't make sense. God's asking Isaac to sacrifice his son. But the thing is, when it comes to existential truth, like I said, it's very limited. Objective truth is total and complete and whole. So there is truth outside of our understanding. Abraham didn't know what it was at the time. He didn't know the whole picture. He didn't see the whole thing. But there was truth outside of everything he was able to grasp in that moment. We don't necessarily have a truth issue. What we have is a faith issue. Right? That's what this all comes down to. God said this. Do I believe that? Do I trust that? Do I have faith in that? Because my limited understanding is going, whoo, this is a tough one. This is weird. I'm not quite sure. But in the book of Hebrews, when it tells us that Abraham believed to the extent that he knew, okay, well, God gave me this son and he gave me these promises. Therefore, he must have a plan of resurrection for my child. Wow, that belongs in the hall of faith, because that's crazy. That takes a lot of faith. Abraham wasn't saying, I need more truth here. He got his orders. He had everything that he needed to know. It was now walking it out by faith, or, I'll be honest with you guys, I've talked to some people who were not either A, strong Christians or Christians at all. And they said, I don't like that. That's making me not want to trust God, right? That faith right there was not in what was good and whole and complete and true. The existential, subjective truth started taking over and saying, I think I know better here, right? I think I know what's better. Even though God commanded such and such, what I know is better, this is wrong. And you guys will probably still meet people today who are like, if there is a God, I don't believe there is one, but if there is one, then he's got some explaining to do, right? Because there are some things that just don't make sense. So, with this sin issue, it brings us to the conversation of Jesus, right? We have a huge problem with sin. Why did Jesus come? So it says In the very first chapter of the Gospel of John, Jesus came to bring grace and truth. That's good news right off the bat. This is really good news. In addition to that, later on in that same gospel, we have a conversation that takes place between Pilate and Jesus. And Jesus says to Pilate, "For this cause I was born, and for this cause I have come into the world." What is this for? John 3:16, to be the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. Like, what is the cause? And here he says that I should bear witness to the truth. Now, there are a number of reasons why Jesus came. I have a spreadsheet, no surprise. And in that spreadsheet, I have 15 reasons why he came by the declarations of Christ himself. But this is a big one. This is a really big one. He came to bear witness to truth. Remember, I said truth is something that's revealed. And in the history of religion, right, with the Israelites, everything that they know and worship and regarding God is all revealed to them. Well, now we have this full revelation that has come in Jesus. We have God with us now, demonstrating, revealing truth in ways that should completely change the world, and it did, but was everyone believing it? It wasn't a truth issue, right? It was a faith issue. They're dealing with different things. It wasn't that the truth wasn't sufficient. It's that it was not met with the faith that it could live, that it could take place and root in their hearts and in their lives. Pilate says to him, "What is truth?" And he says it in a way that I can only understand as scoffing at Jesus, condescending, right? I'm not trying to infer too much here, but it looks pretty clear from the text that Pilate's just like, what is truth? And I can't be the only person in this room where the Holy Spirit has spoken to me and the Holy Spirit has tried to bring me to truth, and I scoffed it and I rejected it. But the thing is, Pilate was face to face with truth. Jesus was truth. Truth is one of the moral, what is that called? The attributes. Truth is one of the moral attributes of God. And here he was, manifested fully in front of Pilate. And Pilate didn't really have like a maneuver where his power or his argument superseded anything Jesus said or did. But Jesus only speaks up in regards to this moment and the declaration of truth. And Pilate has nothing left to do but to walk away from it. Do we know the truth? Do we know the words of Jesus? Do we have truth? And then ultimately, does it matter? Does it matter that I have that? Does it matter what God said? Do I open the Word and do I read it as this is the only completely true, ontologically based fact certainty in all of existence? But it gets a little tricky because, as you guys may have known, we're not the only church in town. So, well-meaning, Bible-believing people can read the Word of God, objective truth. They can understand it, but there might be some differences in how we're seeing it. And here's why. You will never be like God, even though from Genesis chapter 3, that's been the lie. You will never be like God, knowing complete and absolute truth fully. Only God will. Only God knows the totality and certainty of fact, reality, past, present, and future. Only God is omniscient. We can gaze upon what is true. We can study what is true. We can watch it. We can do what we can to draw near to it. But we will only ever have our perspective, our limited perspective. So it is so important. Like, just imagine, for anybody who's ever been on a cruise ship, right? Sometimes you look out there and you're like, is that land? Do I see land? Are we there yet? And somebody might say, I see it. And it's usually a little kid. There it is, there it is. And there's not. But then somebody might say, yeah, I think there's something out there. It's a little foggy and a little hazy and everything. But I think we've got something. I think there's something out there. But from your vantage point, you might be looking in the wrong direction in the ship, right? You have eyes, you have senses and everything like that, but we may not see where we're supposed to be seeing. We may not be looking where we're supposed to be looking. I can't be the only person in here who has ever read the Bible, maybe a particular passage, dozens of times, and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh my goodness, I've never seen this before. This is amazing. Because our perspective will only ever be limited and finite, just like Abraham's, right? But he was operating out of faith. I don't understand it. I don't know how he's going to do it. I don't know how he's going to make this work. Faith is what destroyed my relationship with God when I was younger. I didn't have the faith that he was still good. I started judging God because I saw so many things that were not good, right? My faith was brought into subjection to my will and my authority, my limited perspective, my vision, and my understanding. So when we see Jesus as the truth and life, the way, what effect did it have on some people? John the Baptist. That's not it. John the Baptist. I need to be baptized by you, and are you coming to me? Like, just imagine that for just a second. Oh, that must have been hard for John, right? Everything he's ever known in regards to God, everything he's been able to wrap his head around, he's like, no, this is not how I envision this. It was hard for him when he came face to face with the truth. And really, I mean, just think about Jesus saying, no, John, you're doing great, right? Everything you're doing, it's right. And I'm here to come alongside and to fulfill all righteousness in this ministry that you've been called to. Didn't make sense. Would probably try to, not have our brains explode thinking about it too much. But this is what Jesus wanted to do. He wanted to go through and fulfill this. Peter, right? He comes face to face with truth and he says, depart from me. I'm a sinful man, O Lord. He has this recognition. It hits him. You're going to find tons of these examples, Old Testament and New Testament, but one more I want to look at is Legion. It says, when he saw Jesus from afar, he ran and worshiped him. This is what happened when he came face to face with truth. What have I to do with you, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? He recognized it. He saw it. He submitted to it, I dare say, a lot better than what we see people do, right? So, we have to be careful about existential truth, our subjective truth, my truth. I'm not going to, if you feel this room is cold or warm, I am not going to question any of that, right? That's good. What's the best color, right? What's your favorite ice cream or favorite thing to do? That's all great. That's all great. And it has its place. But that is not the same as ontological truth. That is not the same as the truth of God. And we have to be careful, not just, right, to mix those two up, but we have to be careful to be the saints who are called to be the salt and light of the earth, to not just, I want to say, be too harsh, right, with people who don't understand these things. But we want to be careful. If this helps in any way in knowing and understanding some of the differences, and okay, this makes a little bit more sense now. There's some compartments here in which might clarify some things, and it could also be mixing some things up when I'm dealing with people who have some confusion with truth, or who do not recognize some of the ontological truth, some of the absolute truth in regards to God and his holiness. So what I can do is I can help to draw near to those things. I can help them to understand. We don't have to be condescending. We don't have to be judgmental. We can be loving as we do these things. Right? We can love people in the truth. Show them the truth. Share with them, if necessary, the words of truth. But my goodness, we can certainly live it in front of them and give a demonstration of it. So, recaps. Ontological truth exists outside of our experience, things that are total, complete, and whole, absolute, certain, and reality. There is objective truth. We can know the truth. Only God has truly, completely objective knowledge. I'm going to leave that up there for a second. Only God has that total, complete omniscience. Okay? We are incapable of having truly objective knowledge. It's not possible. We experience everything with a limited and finite perspective. And the more that we align ourselves with objective truth, the more we will have knowledge of what is truth. Right? So we use that truth as a base. And it's our alignment tool. If I have something that I know, I can trust this. I can trust this more than my own thoughts. I can trust this more than my own reasoning and my own logic. I can trust this. I can trust God. Well, if I start to align my life more with that, if I start to process everything that I see and everything I think with what I know truth is as opposed to what my opinions are, because our opinions do change, don't they? They certainly do change. And we might think one thing when we're 12, and we might think a totally different thing by the time we're 13. Everything could change dramatically. But if we have something that's unchanging, like God, where there's no shadow of turning to God, he is the same, past, present, and future. He is good. Truth is an attribute of God and not of anybody else that you know. Right? This is one of the characteristics that makes up who he is. So then when God asks things that are challenging and hard, like Hebrews chapter 11, the whole chapter, the hall of faith, all those things were hard. That's why they're documented, because of the great faith in which they showed. God just wants us to trust him so that we may walk in truth. Going back to that verse, right? How do we walk in truth? How do we buy truth? How do we live truth? It's not going to be possible without something that's outside of your limited scope and understanding of what truth is. A greater truth. I'm going to stop this one here because I have never come close to this time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to invite the worship team to come back up. I'm here, but everybody else. So you guys come on up, and I'm not quite sure for everybody in this room. I don't know if everybody even realizes how much these things play into the day-to-day decision-making, our processing. Everything from when we're reading, a textbook or a Bible verse. How much, we can read something and just know it. And that's just knowledge, but that's not belief, right? We can just know something. In fact, I don't think I'm the only person here who, one of the most dangerous things for me are the Bible verses that I know so well. Because when I know a Bible verse really, really well, I tend to give it less time to appreciate it, look into it, meditate on it and everything. I'm like, oh yeah, that one. I don't just let it have its way with me and everything. So for me, truth, I didn't realize this until, it's just this year. I was going through an exercise that has to do with core values. And I'm going through this exercise and truth came up, and I was like, yeah, that's an important one. But as I started actually going further and deeper with all the core values, as I had to map them out like order, I ended up finding out that was my number one core value. And the person said to me, how did that happen? How did you get to that place? And I was like, what is going on here, man? I've never thought about this stuff before. And so I'm thinking about why truth is so important to me. And what I was thinking about is how when I was younger, I didn't trust. I stopped trusting my family. I didn't trust my friends. And I especially stopped trusting God. And so truth, for me, became a huge issue. And I came to the place where I was just like, I'm done with everything else and everyone else, and I'm going to just go with what I know, my reality. Because there's a lot to be said for reality. You're telling me there's this one of many different forms of God and cultures and everything like that. Why should I trust you? Why should I believe you? I've never experienced this God. I've never known this God. But the thing is, I kept on rejecting the living God. It's not that he did not intervene. It's not that he was never there. In fact, when I just shared my testimony just this past Wednesday, one of the biggest, most important parts for me in my youth was when God intervened and protected me for the rest of my life and stepped in. The living God. And what I want to encourage you guys in here today is to understand where some of the things in regards to truth might get in the way of what God is calling us to. Some of the things that we feel are true, like, I will, it's always the cliche, if I become a Christian, I'm going to end up going to Africa and all that kind of stuff. Anything for us that's like, I don't do that. Whatever it is that we might say no to God in, it's going to be, everyone's going to have your own individual thing. They're going to be based on fear and not truth. Fear and certainly not faith. And what we want is we want to trust God, right? If he's true, this should be okay. We shouldn't have any problem trusting God. I want to trust you greater and deeper. Here's another truth. Behold the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. He has made all these things to be good. He has made us in his image, and we've become marred with sin. And that was never the end of the story. Truth. People might feel like I used to feel, I am so distant from God. And that was never true. Feelings don't equal truth. But the gospel is that Jesus came to take the sins of the world. And that if we believe in our hearts, and if we confess with our mouths, if we cry out to him, just like it says in Psalms, truly, not just the words and not just the motions and not just the obligations and everything like that, but if we cry out to God, truly, I know what it's like to be renewed in truth. I know what it's like to walk away from every single lie that I've built my house on, and to walk away from the lies, the destruction and everything else, and to walk into the truth knowing I was in really good hands. Really good hands. So, as we close this out, something happens when you're teaching in the morning. You pay extra special close attention to the worship, and even being a worship leader here for many, many years, it's always the same thing. I always notice, and there was such, the songs this morning, even the Christmas songs were dripping with the gospel. All over. I don't think there's any coincidence to those things, right? God is so near to us in his truth and wanting to free us from the darkness that enslaves our mind with lies. The truth is so good, and it's nothing to be afraid of, nothing to fear. I just want to encourage you guys to take whatever small measure and steps in truth to draw near to God, because he promises in truth that he will draw near to us as well. Let's pray. It is wonderful to be in the hands of the God of all truth. You are so kind and you are so loving. You want us to know you as a father. And Lord, I just want to have this morning to proclaim your truth and its efficacy. the efficient work and also clarity for confusion. Yes, in our own lives where there's confusion. Yes, in our own lives where the things that we are limited by with our finite understanding get in the way of your big picture and your great truth. Lord, increase our faith. Help us to see. And until we see, Lord, help us to trust in you. And I pray also, Lord, for the world that is around us. I pray in regards to the confusion and the lies. I personally feel they're growing up with lies like I didn't know about. So completely immersed in things that are distortions of truth that it's easy. It has become so much easier to put off truth and the conviction of the Holy Spirit. Nonetheless, Lord, we pray for you to break through and that your kingdom would have its effective work. We pray for the Holy Spirit to bring conviction in the world so that they might repent, they might change their mind and come to the place of truth. And Lord, we want to be ambassadors of this truth in grace and in love. And everyone said, amen.